Oftentimes when you begin your journey as an entrepreneur, an author, anything that takes a, learning and investigating, you don't really understand how powerful small moments are in your life. Our current guest started sewing as a child with her mother and grandmother in rural Minnesota. Mindy Martell later realized that clothing design and creation could be an actual career. And after studies and working for several clothing lines, she started a design house and one of the first women-owned apparel factories in the United States, helping clients get thousands of products made since then. And lately, she's been creating courses. She's written a book, which we'll talk about, and continues to mentor clients from product to idea, making their dreams a reality. And this earned her the title of the Apparel Mentor, and her new book, Get It Made, Build Your Clothing Line from Idea to Reality, is what we'll be talking about today. And I'm so thrilled because I had the privilege of getting to know Mindy over the last year. And I'm thrilled that you're here. Mindy, thank you for being a guest.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? When people are always curious, how do the busy CEOs write a book? And it feels daunting to even say it. Fit a book somewhere in the schedule. But there was a part of you that decided that book was so important, especially in this industry, especially from a woman, especially about the topics you chose. Tell us about the decision that you had to go through in order to make this book a reality.
Oh, that's a good question. Well, the book's been brewing in my head for seriously, probably 15 years.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it maybe was a little easier than some CEOs in the sense of over the past 10 years, I've been developing like curriculum for classes that I teach for new apparel entrepreneurs and kind of revising it and, sussing all that out for many years. So I already had a good framework, written as part of my business model of like what I do with my business. So that really helped a lot because I already had a little head start.
Right.
And then, why did I find it important? I mean, this is my biggest passion in life has turned into helping apparel entrepreneurs navigate the industry. It's super confusing when you're new to the industry. So it's basically what I've dedicated my life and business to is helping them succeed.
Right. You know what? I found it very fascinating that you were one of the first women-owned factories for apparel in the U.S. Why did you decide to build a factory? In the era of the early mid 2000s, people were fleeing from the U.S. building factories. It seemed like probably the opposite of what logic was saying. Why did you choose to start a factory?
Yeah, that's a great question. It actually happened pretty organically. I was trained in the apparel industry. I worked a few corporate jobs. I quit working when I had small children and was freelance designing. And then I would go out and find factories for my clients. And what I discovered, especially, in the early 2000s, like you said, there was a huge wave of just everything's big box, making overseas, making hundreds of thousands of units of everything. And anyone who had a desire, just a singular person or a really small company who had a desire to make apparel, there was no avenue for them to take. It was either make one thing at a time at a tailor shop or make 10,000 units in Asia, and there was no in between.
Right.
And so I opened my factory as an offering to my clients to give that kind of in between. You're not ready to make 10,000 units, so what do you do?
Right.
So it was kind of sometimes I call it a necessary evil to achieve my mission is why I originally opened my factory.
Yeah. You also mentioned in the book when you're talking about what you observed in factories abroad, like the work conditions, the labor issues, the way they treated women or younger, even children. What was it about going to those factories that really struck you about how important it has continued to be that you create a very
Yeah,
sustainable business that is actually ethical?
right. Yeah, so early in my career, and even very, very early when I was freelancing, I would travel to Asia and Central America quite a bit for lots of my clients. Um, and one trip I took, one of the last trips I took over in Asia, um, I was there, I was in a factory for 14 days working alongside the pattern makers, and I was in their workrooms. I was on the factory floor because we were trying to solve this problem. And so they gave me access that was very different to the access they normally give people that come visit. Normally, when you go visit, you're, kind of, you walk through the factory really quick, and then you kind of get swept away into these like beautiful design offices, on the fourth floor or whatever, and you never go back to the factory, and you don't, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. Now you go to these offices and work. Well, because we were having a particular problem that needed to be solved technically, I was like working on the floor for 14 days, and I got physically sick during that trip. Um, like just it physically affected me mentally and physically, just the conditions that were going on. Well, one thing that people don't probably aren't aware of is most of the workers live on site. Um, they're dormed on site. They work 7 days a week. They work usually 14-hour days. Um, there are armed guards at the gates. So if you want to leave, I'm not sure you can. Um, I'm not sure what they got paid, but I do know that as a guest, I was given like cans of soda or something like that I would have with me. And they were like so envious of my can of soda that I would have that they wouldn't have. When it was time to eat, like the bell would ring and everyone would stop sewing and they'd go eat, and it was kind of just like the slop line that they would get into. um, all of the internet access for the entire complex would shut down when the bell would ring and they were on break. And then as soon as they went back to their sewing machines, the internet access would come back on, um, because they didn't want them having access to the outside world. So as soon as their shifts were done too, all of the internet shut down. They had like spies working within the complex of, reporting anybody who was maybe bad mouthing the place, or, you know, any gossip or anything that might be going on. There were kind of spies working around. So it was a very intense, gross, scary atmosphere. That again, I'd been traveling over there for years and just didn't realize how bad it was until I was working alongside them. And that was the last time I ever made anything overseas. That was probably in 2008, I believe. So yeah, that is another huge reason I started my factory as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. One, that you were able to observe it, but to make an impact by choosing to change the way things happen. So many people would see that and just block it out because there's profits attached to it. There's opportunity.
Right.
And I think that's what makes your book and your message so powerful, is that, and we encourage you to include it in there, because like, this is an important thing that people go, this is my person, because she stands for something more than how to do something.
Right.
Right. It's sort of your stance for what's right, as well as helping people do it well. Because your book is very technical. It isn't
Yes.
a fashion. Like, I think a lot of people listening might think when they hear fashion apparel or hear apparel, they think of fashion and runways and, pictures on Instagram, and yet this is a very important sector of our entrepreneurial world. And so I bet you fewer people get into it because they don't know how intricate the business is, how
Right.
complex, how market driven their products have to be. This isn't a, oh, it'd be fun to design a purse. This is not sewing. Yes, you might have started sewing on your table at home, but
Right.
this is a very important business. And if we're going to continue to thrive in the US or in whatever country you're in, if you're listening to another country, your own country probably has very similar experiences, versus abroad versus here. What are the biggest mistakes you see people doing when they think, I might have a product I want to design that's apparel oriented, and they start trudging out in the internet or Googling or YouTubing things out there?
Sure. Well, one mistake I see a lot of people make is they think they need to either go to design school or go buy a sewing machine and learn how to sew. That's just not going to get you anywhere. Either one of those things aren't really going to get you anywhere. The design school would be slightly helpful, but only maybe like 25% helpful.
Yeah.
So that's one of the biggest mistakes. Another big mistake I see is, people think the steps that you take are, I have an idea for a clothing line, and now I'm going to go tell a factory and then they're going to make it. And that's like,
Right.
those are the steps right there, done. And I actually have, 20 topics in the book that go from idea to getting your factory to make your product, because it's, people don't realize it's a product development process,
Right.
which, in my opinion, kind of leads into my like feminist stance on the whole industry. If that, because it's something that like maybe your aunt or your grandma can do, maybe your aunt sewed your prom dress, or your grandma, sewed some quilts or something like that. I think that it's a way undervalued industry because it has been done by women, is my theory, for so long, that people don't understand making apparel is product engineering, just like making anything else, right? So,
Right.
if you had an idea for maybe a new ergonomic mouse, right? Let's just pretend you had an idea for that. You wouldn't say, I'm going to go get a injection molder and start making this at home, and I'm going to go to engineering school because I want to learn how to make my ergonomic mouse. You would go to product engineers with your idea. You would have schematics made, and you'd pay tens of thousands of dollars to get your idea from your head into a product, right? The same exact process happens with apparel. It's all the same skills. It's all the same process. It's exactly the same, but it's undervalued because women have been doing it for so long, and because overseas labor is so inexpensive,
Right.
and exploited, that people just don't understand the skills that go into it are exactly the same. They're 100% exactly the same as like hard product engineering.
Right.
Um,
Do you
yeah,
feel like this industry is still in some way, like most industries, dominated by males, despite the fact that it has been, like, meaning the business of the making money of in this industry, by males who are leading that, because there's so much, I don't know, it's associated with, like you said, making money, making a product, going to market. And it is just a difficult sort of place or for women to get into. Is there still like a pushback, even though the belief is this is all women sewing in a basement somewhere, versus this is a real important part of and everyone uses the products that you build. Everyone,
right.
we're all wearing,
Yeah,
well, most of
everyone,
us are
every
wearing
single,
clothes, I
well,
would assume.
yeah,
Who knows where you are right now, but
right.
yes.
Um, yeah, so I mean, a lot of it's generational. So, I own a clothing factory in the US. I'm part of associations, of other clothing factory owners. And when I go there, I'm generally the only women owned. Actually, I think always I'm the only women owned person that goes there. And not only that, I'm also the only first generation factory owner that I meet as well. So it's sort of, many of the US factory owners at least are, usually we're on about third generation right now of they've been in the family for that long. And that's just, for whatever reason, it's inherited by the sons. And it's, I don't know. And it's really hard to break into, like, the amount of technical things that I've had to learn over the years to build apparel properly, it's not easy. It's not
Yeah.
an easy thing to just be like, I'm going to start a clothing factory.
Right. I, I don't think any of us think that. I think we're thinking, holy smokes, what are you thinking?
Right.
How complex that is.
Right.
But excuse me, that was not very pleasant. So let me, this is fascinating to me because so many entrepreneurs, let's imagine like someone's an entrepreneur and they're thinking, I think I want to make something. And we don't assign what they're making. I bet there's such a small percentage of people that their mind leaps to apparel. What kind of person do you see that is successful? Like, I'm sure you have lots of students and people even come to your factory. Who tends to be more successful? I know this is a generalization. It's probably not totally fair, but like you notice there's a kind of a characteristic of a person who's designing apparel or thinks the way the apparel industry works, as opposed to, some sort of ego-driven thing.
Right. Um, well, you either have to, well, people that approach it like a business, that's number one.
Okay.
If it's just, if you just think it's going to be Project Runway,
Right.
and it's going to be all just, I made this pretty thing and then voila, I have a clothing line, then you're just not going to be successful. Right. So people that approach it like a business for sure. People that have ideas, and I really work with my mentees, the people that are members in our program, but people that have ideas that understand what makes their product unique. I work a lot, like in the book, actually, there's a couple chapters on that too. It's just like, why do you want your product to exist?
Mm.
If it's going to hang next to another product that's a competitor, why would somebody pick your product over that competitor? And if people can really answer that question and they approach it like a business, then I give their success rate, much higher percentage than people that just think it's going to be like not that it's not going to be fun, but
Right.
it's just going to be like this pretty creative thing only. It's also, a business.
Right. Yeah. Sort of like invention of anything. Everyone thinks, I got this cool idea for invention. You're like, that's great. And right. There's always,
Right.
tell me more. Who would you like to see show up more that don't? Like, what kind of humans do you think, gosh, I wish more of these sorts of individuals would show up?
Oh, that's interesting. Boy, I think the thing that sort of breaks my heart, I guess, are the people that are intimidated.
Mm.
Um, that's like also one of my passions, like value in your idea and not being intimidated to enter the industry, and if that's the only thing stopping you, that makes me sad, right? Like, you might have like the best idea ever, but you're feeling, I don't know, not worthy or intimidated or um, by the whole concept. Like, you do not need to be a high class fashionista to get into it, right? Like, you might have an amazing idea. So I really, really love when people take the leap of, like joining our program or getting into it when I can tell they're a little scared, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's, and that's what I'd like to see more of, because I think there's a lot of great ideas out there.
Yeah. That's amazing. Your book. So the great thing about your book is that it was brought straight from your programs into sort of more of a workbook style sort of document when we started working with it, Mandala Tree Press. And we realized that, gosh, there is very little out there that's doing this well. when we did our own investigation before we decided, is this something we're interested? We're like, gosh, there's so little out here. And the people who are actually doing well may not even have the most experience with the book. You mean like that out there? I was blown away as I read the book. I was like, I actually felt, I would be honest, I was like, oh my God, I think I could do this. Like, I think I understand this. Like, this is,
Let's do it, Azul.
I'm a business owner. I know how, like, I know what it takes. You can't just make things. You have to be thoughtful, just like books. Yes, it's a great idea, but how will be different than the industry? And
Right.
that's what we were looking for in your book. It's like, the difference is you, Mindy, make this book so much more powerful because of the journey you've been on, and what you're standing for might just shape and shift the industry forever. That's a pretty amazing thing. That's what
Yeah.
makes it unique to us. When people come to you, what are the things they say when they actually executed it? They're like, oh my gosh, I did it. What are the kind of feelings and things that they say about it?
I mean, and I guess I don't want to, like, just to toot my own horn, but it it's so rewarding to have that person come up to you and just be like, there's no way I could have done this without your mentoring or your program, or, the book is coming up now with the same stuff. But just really, really thankful, like truly thankful, like from the bottom of their heart.
Yeah.
Really, like, that's that really what keeps me going. So I get a lot of that, and just, and also I get a lot of people that started and fumble through for a year or two before they find, my program. And they're always just like, oh my gosh, I wish I would have found you 2 years ago, because I would have saved money and time. And yeah, so
Yeah.
I'll hearing that is really great.
That's amazing. I think it was interesting that you said this, and I want people to hear this, because I think there's a wave of shifting with work. A lot of people who want to be in the apparel industry will go and try to get a degree in something in fashion or some design, right? They'll spend their years getting out of there trying to get just any job, and then realize that they don't really know anything more from school than they might have known from that couple of weeks in their internship. Like, oh, this is what it is.
Right.
When you looked at other things out there, what was the biggest hole in the books provided out there currently in your industry that you felt like you needed to solve the problem?
Um, there's some great resources out there for marketing your clothing line, for raising investment for your clothing line, for and there's 100 books out there on, like, how to draw fashion and how to, make things pretty. But there was no other book out there that was, how do you actually get it made?
All right.
Like, there's so much to know from okay, I have this pretty drawing, and now I know how to market it, and I know how to do all that, and I business books, and I can figure all that. But, like, how do you actually get your clothing made? It's challenging process, and it's confusing, and there's just not a lot out there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. Even this process of writing a book, it's so mind blowing how much is involved in putting a
Yeah.
book and assembling it. You just don't ever think about it when you pick up a book.
Right.
And
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
something we all know about. And it seems like, well, there's pages and there's words, and like it should be easy. Well, think about how complex an item of clothing or an apparel piece is. And every intricacy has to be solved and mass
Yes.
produced, replicated again and again and again,
Mhm.
and then brought down to a lower price and be beautiful and be marketable and be unique. And
Yeah.
oh my gosh, so
Yeah.
much, right? Before you even
Yeah.
decide you're going to make it. So that's what I
Right.
loved about your book. Your book is very practical. It really doesn't let people dive in to be misguided. It says, look, this is how it is. This is what you're up against, but know that this is a process and you can do it. Like, that was what I felt. I was like, that's why I was like, I think I could do this.
Yeah.
I don't have an idea at the moment, but I was like, this book makes me feel like the mysteries uncovered. There is no more wondering when they say factory. I'm not going, well, what does that mean?
Right.
And I thought that
I
was
love that.
fascinating. And so as you're calling, sort of making a shift, I feel like there is a shift with manufacturing maybe returning to the US for lots of reasons. Supply
Mhm.
change, the shift that COVID brought, the shift in the political climates in the world. There's lots happening. Do you see there a rise in needs for places and more factories here in the US to do the work that you're doing?
I do. There still needs to be a bigger shift on the consumer end,
Mm,
quite a big shift. Um, one thing that's really this is really fascinating to me is, in like 1970s, a polo shirt cost around $20,
yeah,
maybe $25. And you can still get a polo shirt for that price in 2023.
right.
And the reason is the labor just has gotten more exploited, more exploited, more exploited, more exploited. And the reason why I bring that up is if inflation would have happened naturally, right? A polo shirt now should be, I mean, I don't know the exact number, but maybe like $80, something like that.
Right.
Um, and that would make sense. Then we could be manufacturing in the US. Everyone would get used to, you can't get a $20 polo anymore. It's $80, right?
Right.
Um, but we've all been trained that no, a polo can be $20. And that's where it all starts. I mean, until the consumer cares and the good news is more and more are,
Yeah.
like the awareness. There's a whole thing called fashion revolution that's picking up steam, and luckily millennials tend to care
Yeah.
more about sustainability and not exploiting labor and environmental issues and stuff like that. So I have a lot of hope that people will start to care more.
Yeah.
um but yeah, that's actually the biggest thing that's going to have to change is people are willing to pay what things are worth.
Awesome. So let's help the listeners make some decision. Cause I think, yes, maybe it's only a few hundred listening or a few thousand, but like if one or two people say, I could do that, what would you suggest that they do? Like, how would they go about supporting clothing made with ethical principles or in their country or however you would think would be fair? What would that
Yeah.
look like for the consumer? Because right now you go to these big box stores and get a shirt for like $6
Yeah.
and you wear it for a week and poof, the threads falling out. You're like, okay, we're getting
Right.
used to like clothing being
Disposable.
disposable. So
Mhm.
how do you help people understand how they can shift their behavior or where would they look to shift their behavior?
One of the biggest things is buying less. You don't need to have 50 t-shirts. Maybe you need 10, right? And spend the same amount of money you would have spent on the 50 on the 10. And make sure, making sure something's made in the US is one of the best ways to make sure fair labor practices have been used. um, there are a few other ways you can look for certified type factories overseas, but again, I don't really trust those very much. So but that's probably one of the biggest things is just like reduce and just value the labor that went into it and reduce how much you buy, which doesn't necessarily mean it changes your budget you put towards your clothing, but you're putting more value on the labor it took and reducing how much you have.
Yeah, no, that's great. I was in Lisbon and looking for a t-shirt. I lived there, so I wasn't looking for a trinket, but I wanted something locally made that the cotton was actually from Portugal, that the
Yeah.
factory was there, designers were there. It took me a while. We found a shop and the shirts were like 35 t-shirts, 35, $37. And
Yeah.
in the US, like, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. Like, yeah, it's all cotton. It's well made.
Mhm.
It's not synthetic. It's good. I enjoy this. It's original printing. And so part of me felt like, oh, I get it. You do have to search. You have to pay attention.
Yeah.
But it really made me feel good because we're talking to the people who who are like they're at the store, but like, yeah, they represent this company and they were so joyful to talk about their company. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I just have to be more mindful when I'm out
Right.
looking for clothes. And I really think that's awesome that you're doing this. There's something really interesting in your facts that I was like, I had to know because I knew a lot about you, but I didn't know this, which is you accidentally met President Clinton. Well, I'm like, I get that, but I don't. I would love to hear the story because
Yeah.
I think you're kind of the person where, like, you have an extreme amount of luck. Like you have ambition, but there's just something about you that says things go my way. I don't know.
Oh, wow, that's what I never thought about that way. Yeah. So when I was in high school, I got chosen to go on this like student government trip to DC. Um, and me and a girlfriend went from my high school, and um, we were scheduled to go meet our senator on the House steps at a certain time. And we were the only two people from Minnesota. It's like two people from every state would go. Um, and so we were kind of on our own and we were going to go meet our senator. And so we were walking along and heading to the House steps. And as we were doing that, security, like literally we somehow slipped through security on accident because President Clinton was making an appearance on the House steps and we didn't know that was happening. So security was forming a perimeter to keep people away from the House steps at the same time we were walking to them, and we just like slipped through security somehow. And so we went on the steps, and all of a sudden the senator who was supposed to meet us found us, grabbed us and said, "Don't make any sudden moves. You're not authorized to be here. There's snipers on the roof with their guns pointed at you. How did you get in here?" And we're like, we just walked in. We don't know. We just like walked in. And yeah, so we weren't authorized to be there at that moment. And he said, "Well, you're in here now. I know who you are, so stick with me. And the president will be coming down the steps." And he came down the steps, and I ended up meeting him and taking a picture with him. And him and Bob Dole and Paul Wellstone and a whole bunch of people. Yeah. And
That's
then
amazing.
it was done.
That's awesome. I did a program like that in high school too, which it was called Close Up, where you went, somebody got selected and you went to this trip. Probably less nice than yours, but we were supposed to meet our congressperson, in their office, who
Right.
was at that time our congressperson was Leon Panetta, who became the chief of staff and director of CIA. And I remember sitting in his office thinking, this is cool. Like it's so
Yeah.
different than back home. Back home is just you feel like such a
Oh
little
yeah.
kid.
Yeah.
That's
No,
amazing.
it was yeah, it was shocking to just like have the president walk up to you, and you were not totally unprepared for it. That's not why we were there. So yeah,
Right.
it was great.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Because I was like, I've
Yeah.
been wanting to ask you for a while now. I was like, I just know there's a story here.
Right.
Awesome. Well, what would you want people to know about the book writing process? Because there's some people out there listening, they're curious. Like a lot of people are like,
Yeah.
I'd like to write a book. Can I do it? There's a lot involved. Is this the right time? What advice would you give anyone thinking about a book, especially a business CEO, a busy CEO who
Yeah.
is knows it can be an important part of their value add to their community?
Right.
What advice would you share with them?
I would say it's sort of similar to the advice I would share with somebody who wants to start a clothing line is hire experts, hire help. Um, that and I realized after 10 years of thinking about my book, I was like, if I don't, it's never going to happen if I
Right.
don't actually just like, you know, hire some people that and also just find mentors in general. But
Yeah.
you're that's probably one of the biggest things. The other thing is it's a process, right? It's there. I learned from you guys how much different types of editing there are. Um, all of the different layers of going through it and re-editing and re-looking um, and and I would have never understood that. It just would have never happened if I did
Yeah.
it on my own.
Yeah, that's great advice. I feel the same way. Even the team coaches, I run the company, they're coaching me still. Hey, we need your edits. We need it like
Right.
this. You need to do this.
Right.
I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Because it's as you're running a bit, even for me, I'm running, a publishing company. This is sort of like I'm running a publishing company and a coaching company to help people write books, two separate businesses, different models.
Yeah.
But so to do my own work, I need someone to guide me so that I don't get distracted, lost, confused, stall, make bad choices about things I don't know anything about. I have to trust the cover designers when I say this is important because, so I think that's great advice. I learned so much from people who are smarter than me, and I really appreciate that we have people like that in our organization. Well, this has been so great. Where I know there's people listening thinking, I never thought about an apparel product until now. So where would they go find you, and where can they connect with you?
Yeah. So you can find us at theapparelmentor.com. That's probably the best way to get in touch with us.
Awesome. And you can find her book as it's coming out anywhere online, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon, Target, Walmart, wherever you purchase books, you can find her book. I recommend you find it, especially if you've been thinking about creating a product line and you're wondering about it. Take out the guesswork, get this book. And plus, and if you're if you have a business like this, it's great to get this book to see how well integrated the two separate businesses are, because I know that Mindy made a conscious choice, like, hey, our factory business is full. I want this to be directed towards my apparel coaching business. That's thriving. I don't have any more room. So the book is designed to do exactly that. And
Mhm.
so if you're building a book, it really has to be intentional about what do you want the outcome to be. And I thought you did a great job, and your team, to make sure it's clear of the objective of that. So go to theapparelmental.com, find the book. This has been such a joy, such a momentous moment to have this call and to be able to share your journey with the world. And I'm thrilled to know you. Thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's great.
Awesome.